So I'm going to teach you how to make a drawstring waistband. It's quite a simple one, and you do it by constructing a channel around the waistband and sewing in either buttonholes or putting eyelets in where you want your drawstring to come out. So this pattern I've got in front of me is a self-faced waistband, which means it's got a seamless edge and the waistband is already sort of incorporated into this main garment piece. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to get our fabric and turn it right side to right side, and I'm going to seam those sides. Right, so these have been seamed and I've pressed them open. Now, ordinarily, if I was doing this on a real garment, I would take some time to finish off these raw edges. And I'll link a couple of videos below of all the different seam finishes that you can do. But for the sake of this project, I'm just going to leave them raw. So the next thing we're going to do is take our measurement for our waistband itself. Now, if you're working from a pattern, there's a good chance that that would already be part of the pattern piece itself or part of the instruction. There may also be some tailor tack points to pay attention to. But what I'm going to do in lieu of all of that is create my own measurement, and I'm going to fold it at about 3.5 centimeters, which is just slightly bigger than 1.25 inches, I believe, if I do my mathematics right. And that will include the seam allowance of the top. So what we're going to do is we're going to fold this over onto the wrong side, and then we'll fold it again to create the channel. Now, we are doing a drawstring, so therefore we don't want to make an enormously big channel. If we did, then there's a very high risk that the drawstring will just get lost in the channel and it would look a little bit unfinished. So we're going to do quite a narrow drawstring, unless of course you're using elastic at the same time, which is a very common thing in dressmaking. So I'm going to go and press this out and I'll show you the result. Right. So this has been double pressed, so I've got no raw edges poking out, and I need to find the front of the garment to work on. Now, my front and back are identical, but you will need to find your front. And what we're going to do is we're going to take a ruler and we're going to mark against the folded line on the inside of this waistband. And the reason why is because when you're doing a drawstring, or when you look at a garment that's got a drawstring, unless you're doing something very specific with sportswear or swimwear, generally speaking, it is on the front. The drawstrings are on the front of the garment. So we need to work out where we're going to be placing the buttonholes on the front of the garment, not on the back. And a lot of people fall foul of this. They often put the buttonholes on the back, which ends up being on the inside of the garment, which can be quite uncomfortable on the tummy. So what we're going to need to do is we're going to find out where our center lines are here to place our buttonholes. So that's been placed. I've unfolded this seam allowance now, and I'm going to find the center front, because that is also an incredibly important marker. Okay, now you may recall from the buttonhole videos that it's really important, if you are going to put buttonholes into a garment, that you use a stabilizer or an interfacing behind the buttonhole just to keep it nice and secure. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to gently press this interfacing roughly at the center point and against that line, just where the buttonholes are going to be placed, and then I'm going to redraw the center lines onto the interfacing so I know where I'm marking against. So you don't want an enormously big buttonhole. You want one that will just fit your drawstring through. The bigger or the wider the buttonhole is, the more likely you're going to be able to see the inside of your channel, and we don't want to do that. So I am going to probably aim for a buttonhole that's about 1.5 centimeters, which means that I need to be calibrating it against a 1 centimeter button, which I've got here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure that there is a gap between the two buttonholes, and again I'm going to go with about a 1.5 centimeter gap. So I'm going to mark that there, and I'm going to mark that there. Okay, I then want to make sure that I've got the center line of this so that I know exactly what line I should be placing my buttons against. Now I'm going to do a little bit by eye. I might have got a set square out had I been doing it on a real garment. So these are the two spaces, and then I'm going to mark another 1.5 centimeters either side of that, and I'm going to aim to do my buttonholes here and here, and that's a gap in the middle, and so is that, and so is that. So I'm going to go and do the buttonhole now. Again, I'm going to refer you to the buttonhole videos to work out how best to get your buttonholes using your machine. And I'll come back and I'll show you how to finish this off. Right, so they're now done. The only thing left to do is to open those up, which I'm going to do using my preferred method of using the seam ripper, poking the sharp bit through each of the ends and just pulling it out to the middle. That way it avoids potentially ripping into the garment, which is a very common thing that happens in sewing. Right, so I'm going to now just give that another press, get rid of all of that those markings that are not necessary anymore, and I'm going to then refold the channel back into place, so the waistband will start to really take shape now. And when I take it to the sewing machine, I'm going to be sewing sort of an edge stitch really quite close to this folded edge of the garment. Got to be very careful not to catch the buttonhole. And if I really wanted to do, I could do a similar edge stitch along the top, just so there's symmetry on the waistband, but that's an aesthetics thing rather than anything that is a necessity. So I'll go and do that now, and I'll show you the result. Right, so I've placed this now in the machine to sew the channel. So I have placed this edge on the inside of this hole on the foot where the needle goes. Now if I really wanted to, I could also move the needle slightly further to the left if you have the capacity to do that. Not all machines will. So if you are doing a running stitch and you change your stitch width, you might be able to position the needle ever so slightly over to the left hand side. But as I said, not every machine will have that capacity. It'll just help me with the alignment. So I'm going to warp this in. You may also notice that I've actually pinned horizontally opposed to vertically, and this is just to help the channel stay exactly where I want it to be. So I'm going to just run a couple of stitches, and I'm going to reverse, and then off we go. And there we are, that's all sewn. So the last thing we now need to do is to thread the cord through it. Now, a lot of people like to use safety pins because most sewers have them in their toolkits, but I am really fond of bodkins. So bodkins are actually a type of needle and you get many different varieties, but these are the two that I particularly like. So this is a needle bodkin with a sort of a very, very large eye that you put your cord or your elastic through, and you push it down the shank of the needle, and that keeps it nice and secure when you're feeding it through a channel. You also get bodkins that have little grippers, and you grip the cord or elastic or the ribbon, and you push this little stopper down the shank to stop that from moving. I have to say this one's far better on elastic and ribbons than this one, but this is really good for things like shoelaces and macrame cord and those sorts of things. So I'm going to use this one to thread it. So I'm just going to thread this needle, this bodkin, and I'm going to feed it through this channel. It might feel a little stiff as you start going, but it will go. And I think these bodkins just really speed up the process. I do find safety pins to be a little bit fiddly when you try and feed cord through a channel. So I'm going to go back out the other side, and there we go. And what we want to do is make sure that your drawstring is evenly distributed, just like so. So you will notice that these may fray a little bit, so you either want to tie them off, and you may consider putting these little sort of charms or stoppers on. They're actually called eyelets, and the best way to feed cord that's particularly frayed through the tiny hole at the top of this aglet is actually to use a bit of masking tape, which, as we all know, is my favourite thing in the world. So I'm going to just quite tightly collect all of those frays up and create a nice narrow channel, and I'm going to place it through so that I can then knot it and cut off that excess at the bottom and put that through the aglet, and there we go. That's lovely and neat. So I'm going to do the other one, and then that will be the finished drawstring.